What are discs? Well, you've probably heard about a bulging disc or a herniated disc. The discs are the spacers in between the bones of the spine. We call these vertebrae. So the discs provide a cushioning for the body. They provide the support for that spine. And most importantly, they hold the bones open to help form holes on the side of the spine where the nerves come through. Those holes are called intervertebral foramen. You don't have to remember that. That's Latin for nerve hole. It's pretty clever. Anyway, when the discs get squished, sometimes that closes down the hole and that can pinch a nerve, which causes pain. It can cause conditions such as sciatica or peripheral neuropathy. So the discs also create the shape of the spine. The discs are smaller towards the top in the neck, and as they go down the body in between the bones, they get bigger and bigger, the biggest ones being at the base of the spine. Also, they're not completely flat. Some of them are wedge-shaped, which creates the curves in the spine. We should have normal curves in the spine. We should have a forward curve in the neck and the low back, and a backwards curve in the mid-back. And that really acts as the shock absorber for all the effects of gravity on the spine. It's really important then that the discs retain their shape. When they get damaged, they change shape, and that can flatten out the spine. So if we consider that these curves in the spine act as a spring or spring-like action, by straightening out all those curves, it doesn't become springy at all, and this is where we start to see real wear and tear happen in the spine and in the discs themselves. So let's look at the disc itself. The disc is composed of two main parts, a middle part, which is like a jelly center, mostly composed of water, and that's called the nucleus pulposus. That's surrounded by rings and rings and rings of very tough cartilage called the annulus fibrosus. And the purpose of that disc, again, is to support that spine. But it also allows movement of the spine. So unlike the hard bone, this has to be pliable. It has to move. It has to be flexible. And it's interesting that the rings of that annulus fibrosus are arranged in a way that they lie kind of in a crosshatch pattern, which makes it stronger and resistant to tearing and ripping. So it's cool. When you twist, when the body twists, half of those fibers will engage, strengthen, and the other half will loosen to allow that movement. When it gets damaged, it doesn't do that anymore, and that starts leading to big problems. So when a disc gets damaged, there are a few things that happen to it. The first thing is that it starts to dry out. It starts to lose water. And since the consistency of that disc is mostly water, it loses function. It loses its ability to support that spine. So as it dries out, it becomes less pliable and less able to resist movement, and we start to see damage to the fibrous rings around that middle part, and then it doesn't move as well, and it starts degrading, and it starts actually compressing. So what happens, instead of it being nice and juicy like a porterhouse steak, it ends up drying out and can eventually get to be like beef jerky. Not good. Let's talk about some of the terminology that we use to talk about damage to the discs. We've probably heard a lot of things like bulging discs, herniated discs, disc extrusion, all of those things. What do they mean? Well, let's clarify that. A bulging disc is when that disc gets damaged and the cartilaginous rings weaken to the point where things start pushing out and that disc starts spreading and getting bigger. We call that a bulging disc. And it can be generalized, meaning it's like flattening out like a pancake, coming out like that, or we can have localized bulging in certain areas. Okay, and that one would look more like that. It's pretty nasty. When that happens, that can put pressure on the nerve. We call that a pinched nerve, and it can cause things like sciatica or peripheral neuropathy. Second thing is something called a herniated disc. This involves the middle part of the disc. That's called the nucleus pulposus. And that's when that nucleus pulposus migrates out through tears in the annulus, through the cartilage, and we get disc material actually coming out into the areas where the nerve root sits. Again, that can cause really tremendous pain, sciaticas, and peripheral neuropathies. Another thing that can happen is something called a disc extrusion, where the disc material actually migrates out here and goes up or down into the spinal column where the spinal cord sits and creates a mass effect there that is even more serious than what is seen in sciaticas or peripheral neuropathies.